The New Testament Church welcomes you to join us as Pastor Magead Salloum leads us in seeking a closer relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ, changing us from glory to glory.
Title of my message, Events That Mark the End Could Mean the Beginning. Events that mark the end could mean the beginning. Death could mean resurrection. Death could mean a better place or a new life. So we're going to go to the scripture in Ruth chapter 1. Ruth chapter 1. I'm reading from verse 1 through verse 18. Ruth chapter 1, verses 1 through 18. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled. You all read the book of Judges, I assume. There was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem. Bethlehem means the house of bread. Beth means house, and Lechem means bread. So Bethlehem means the house of bread. So a certain man from the house of bread went to sojourn in the country of Moab. There was famine there, so he went to Moab. He and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech. The Hebrew Elimelech. Elimelech, which means my God is king. Now there's a meaning and there's a reason for the names, and there's a purpose in this message that we want to find out, even though it seems like the end of life for Ruth, for Orpah, for Naomi, but there was a great purpose and divine purpose that God had chosen and prepared. So the name of his wife, Naomi, which means pleasant, the Hebrew word Naomi means pleasant, or favor, a favor of the Lord, and the name of his 2 sons. Now, I suggest you never name these names. His 2 sons. His 2 sons' names, Mahalan, which means sickness, if you're taking notes. Mahalan in the Hebrew means sickness, Mahalon. Mahalan, and the next one is Chilion, which means pining or wasting away. What 2 names? Terrible names to name your kids. One is sickness and one is pining or wasting away. So I tell you what, their condition, the condition of the parents was not that great. They were apparently in a backslidden condition even when the children were born, to give them such names. That tells you about their spiritual walk. Okay? Now, when I gave names to my children, I wanted names that are alive, that are good, that are healthy. Okay? And I added to all of these names Prince and Princess. Okay, so that made sure that they're leaders. Okay, that's the way you should name your kids, because names mean something. So they're Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah, and they came into the country of Moab. And by the way, the country of Moab is the son of Lot, L-O-T, Lot, by his eldest daughter. Remember what happened there? And so he had a son, Lot had a son through his eldest daughter, and his name was Moab. And that's where the Moabites came from. And they continued there, and Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. And she was left, and her 2 sons. They took him wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one is Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. I didn't look up Orpah, what it meant, but Ruth means a friend. Okay? And they dwelled there about 10 years. And Mahalan and Chilion died also, both of them. And the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband. She was a widow. Nobody, no men around. Verse 6, then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab. See, what happens sometimes, people get impatient because there's not enough bread, and they move on without seeking God's will and purpose. Okay? Sometimes we're in a hurry to move. We're in a hurry to do something because there's a promise of a higher pay. And maybe you should be careful and dig in there and wait to hear from God before you move. That's all we're saying. So they heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return unto the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. It's hard to part when you've known each other for so long. And they said unto her, Surely we will return with thee unto thy people. So both of them wanted to go back with her. They loved her so much. And Naomi said, Turn again, my daughters, why will ye go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? They used to have a tradition that when someone dies, you marry the next brother, and that was not the case. She didn't have any more sons. Turn again, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have an husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, would you tarry for them until they were grown? Would you stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. But Ruth like this one, clave unto her. And by the way, this is really equated with marriage. A husband and wife, they cleave to one another. I mean, we get married, things are well, first few months, and then the ups and downs, the first couple of years, and then things happen in the future. Maybe finances are not well, maybe one of you is not paying attention to the other one, and we get discouraged and we get disappointed. Maybe I married the wrong one, etc., etc. But remember, you have made a commitment. You got to cleave to one another and say, no matter what, I'm going to love him, I'm going to love her, no matter what. Through thick and thin, in sickness and in health, no matter what, I'm going to stick together with him and with her. But Ruth clave unto her. And she said, behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back to her people and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go. Where thou lodgest, I will lodge. That's a pretty high commitment and deep commitment. Thy people shall be my people. Let me answer that one. And thy God, my God, where thou diest, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. That's where they get, till death do us part. So when Naomi saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking with her. So I want to get back to that commitment that Ruth made and emphasize it. But my goal today is for us all to see that God has a plan, has a purpose. God has interwoven details of your life and ironed them out. God can use what we think are horrific happenings in our lives. Sometimes when we think an event is marking the end, it really is marking the beginning. So there's a story I was reading about, and I want to share it with you. Our own very United States former First Lady, Laura Bush, endured a very difficult tragedy in her youth. At the age of 17, she was borrowing her parents' car with 3 of her friends, driving across Midland, Texas. They were on a farm market road, only driving 55 in a 65 zone. Laura was not breaking the speed limit, but she did not see the stop sign. Laura went through the intersection and hit a car broadside. Laura and her friends had only minor injuries, and they went to the hospital for the night. Laura's parents had the horrific duty of telling her that the person she had passed away. Laura was devastated, to say the least, but the bad news was not over. 2 days later, she learned that the man who died was not just any man, but it turned out to be a young man by the name of Michael Douglas, who was her high school sweetheart. Laura Bush had hit her own boyfriend and he died. Laura didn't come out of her bedroom for weeks. She had been an honor student, but could not bear going back to school. We look back on this many years later, and former President Bush said, Laura Bush is the strength and balance of my life. I don't know what I would do without her. See how things turn around. Even though bad things happen, sometimes there's something good that God intends. He's not the one who caused the bad. Now, understand that. But He would use that to enhance you and to bring about divine purpose. And so, Naomi lost her husband. Naomi lost her 2 sons. And you think that's it. She's a widow. She's going to live poor, without anything, without any man in her life. Ruth and Orpah, they're going to live without husbands. They can remarry perhaps and find a new life, but it was too late for Naomi because of her age. But God is, we're going to see, we see in the story that God changed things around. And things got better and better and better. Naomi, whose name was Pleasant, when she came back with Ruth, the Moabitess, and came back to Bethlehem. They walked in and they called her, they remembered her, and they called her Naomi. And she said, "Why do you call me Naomi? You can call me bitter." That's how she felt. She was so sad, so depressed. But she did have a good influence on Ruth. So what you sometimes may think is destiny for your life may take a drastic turn. Somehow God will work through our worst storms in life and become our destiny. When you think about Joseph had dreams and visions of his mother and father bowing down to him, of his brothers bowing down to him. He had no understanding at the time, but when he was sold to the Egyptians, what did he think? What do you think he thought? Maybe this is the end. Forget the dreams. It's not happening, folks. Then he winds up in the house of Potiphar. And he became leader in the house of Potiphar, and it was great, but then he winds up from the house of Potiphar into the prison. That's even worse. And he was innocent. And, but you know, God took all the circumstances and took Joseph and set him as a prime minister in Egypt at the time. Turned everything around for him. So the thing is, when we go through difficulties, let us wait on the Lord and let us understand that even if it's a death situation, God can turn things around. God can have a better purpose than the way you look at things. When things fail, that's not the end. When you hit bottom, it's not the end. God is going to turn things around for you because he has a purpose. And I think he has divine purpose for every one of us today. No matter what we have gone through, no matter what kind of failures we have faced, no matter what dead end situations we've come across, God is going to turn things around for us. Look at what happened to Naomi. Look at what happened to her. She became the great grandmother of David. Amazing. So I want to share some things here. Ruth is the only book in the Bible that is entirely written about a woman as a central figure, as opposed to Esther being a book containing a lot of other characters of detail with much other than Esther. Ruth is a 10-generation redemptive story. And here's where I'm going to get into things here. From Adam to Jesus, there are 60 generations named. 60 men and women who were in the genealogy of Christ. 6 groups of 10 each. Are you with me? Okay, very important. If there are 60, and 6 is the number of man or flesh, 10 is the number for redemption. When it's multiplied, that shows that God is involved. So 60 is 6 times 10. Which means man's redemption being worked by God. It starts with Adam, he falls. It ends with Jesus, he redeems. But every group of 10 was a pronounced and distinguished redeemer. Start with Adam, and you read 9 more names that you hardly know, then you get to Noah. Noah was the first 10th generation redeemer. Noah was the first 10th generation redeemer. Then you go 9 more from Noah, and names that you hardly know, and you come to a second huge name with implications for our faith, and that's Abraham. That's the second 10. Then you go through 9 more names from Abraham, and you come to the name Boaz. Boaz is the one that Ruth marries. Okay? So you do that 6 times, you will end with the name of Christ. So the third group of 10 ends with the name Boaz. So Ruth, I said Naomi, I'm sorry, but Ruth was David's great-grandmother, even though she was a Gentile. The first verse of the book says this: Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. So we want to identify and understand meanings. Bethlehem proves to be prophetically significant throughout the Bible because of heavenly bread coming out of Bethlehem. Matthew chapter 2 verse 1 tells us that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. John 6:35 says Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Where was he from? Bethlehem, the house of bread. So it was prophetic. The Moabites were a nation of people that came from Lot's lineage. They were not under Abraham's covenant, so they were Gentiles. If you don't have a covenant with God, you're a Gentile. They lived worshiping many gods and did not know or worship the one true God of Israel. And so Naomi was inviting her two daughters-in-law to go back to Moab. We need to understand the prophetic implications and the meanings of these names. Elimelech was the husband of Naomi. Prophetically, Naomi represents the favor of God, but the whole system that Naomi represented is Israel as ancient covenant people of God. As the ancient covenant people of God. Ruth comes to represent a latecomer or a chosen outsider, which has to be the church of Jesus Christ, which becomes the bride of Boaz. Boaz is a type of Christ. He's called the kinsman redeemer. And Boaz means in him is strength. And you can find it in the concordance, number H5797. Oz means strength. In him is strength. It's ironic that the house of bread ran out of bread. And these people looked for a more fertile field to get food. Sometimes, if we're in a hurry, we miss God. That's a test. Don't go to Moab. There's always a Moab waiting for you and for me when we run out of bread in the house of bread. You know, sometimes people sit in the church say, "Oh, we are not being fed." Okay? Well, what do you expect? If you live in a house, one day you cook macaroni, the next day you cook spaghetti. Am I saying the right? Two different things. And the next day you keep on cooking. I mean, how many recipes do you have? 100 recipes? Then you got to repeat the same thing. "Oh, Mama, I love this breakfast, the way you make it." And she makes it again and again. And sometimes we have to repeat because the Bible repeats itself. And after you've heard Pastor preach 3,000 messages, man, I can only mix them in a different way once in a while, but that's just about it. And some people say, "Well, he's not teaching us," and complaining, instead of you on your own studying.
Thank you for watching this edition of Glory to Glory. We would appreciate your prayerful support of our ministry. You're welcome to join us at the New Testament Church, 6772 Lanphier Road in Rome, Fridays at 7:30 and Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30. From the New Testament Church and Pastor Magead Salloum, may the power and blessings of the Lord Jesus Christ be with you.